You guys like my stuffed animals? I'm on my Jenny Nicholson arc. Jenny Nicholson, please unblock me. I don't know why you blocked me. I am sorry for whatever I did. Please, I love you, queen. Hi. So I was going to record this video about 2 weeks ago. And then I went to the ER with food poisoning. So that was cool. So then I was going to record it last week. But I threw my fucking back out like a 95-year-old man. So we're a little bit late, and now everybody's kind of already talking about all this stuff, so... Oops. So, apparently, Morbius is bad. Everyone on the internet is saying it sucks at all. I don't know, I haven't seen it. But this is really good timing for me, because with another bad Jared Leto superhero movie coming out, and with, you know, the Batman out with Robbie Patty and Milkshake Twink, I figure this is a perfect time to talk about the other bad Jared Leto superhero movie. And I am, of course, talking about Suicide Squad. Let's go, boys! So I'm sure you're asking, hey Sean, that movie's been talked to death. Are you sure you want to make just a bunch of cold takes on an endlessly maligned movie that everybody was making fun of like 6 years ago for your first video essay ever? One. Yeah. 2, how dare you speak to me? 3, I hopefully have some potentially interesting, more lukewarm takes on it that, you know, might be worth talking about, because I am extremely intelligent. 4, I get to talk about how much I love Heath Ledger, and 5, I don't know if we were mean enough the first time. Hey, sorry to interrupt again, but I just didn't think that was enough justification for me making a fucking Jared Leto Joker video in the year of our Lord 2022, so I wanted to add a couple points to expand on why. Another reason I wanted to talk about the Jared Leto Joker again, rather than just breaking down something more current and topical like Morbius or House of Gucci, is because everything happening now in the Morbin era is just kind of an extension of what was codified with Suicide Squad. So in order to understand how Morbius and House of Gucci happen, it only makes sense to go back and look at how Suicide Squad happened. And I know arguably the trajectory started much earlier with Chapter 27, Dallas Buyers Club, or even Requiem for a Dream, but Suicide Squad is just like, come on. And unlike Jared Leto's characters in those movies, the Joker as a character has been around for so long that it gives us some direct frames of reference to compare to. 2 of which drew widespread praise whilst using supposedly similar techniques, though we'll only be talking about one of them in this video for reasons that should become apparent later on down the line. I think this will prove useful for demonstrating the flaws in Jared Leto's approach to character work as a whole, as a lot of what I point out here can be seen in his approach to and the marketing of his other performances as well. And just for the record, I'm not even much of like a Batman or comic book movie fan in particular. Like, I enjoy some from time to time, and I'm not like a comic book Joker purist or anything. I just find Jared Leto's Joker to be a very interesting case study on acting technique, character choices, and marketing, especially since we have those other performances and interpretations to compare to. And while, again, I know the Jared Leto Joker cringe horse has been not only dead and beaten for years, but has since fully decomposed back into soil from which many new seeds have been planted, grown, blossomed, and harvested into fresh new horses, whom have also since died and been beaten into paste. But somebody left a tiny bit of horse meat in the freezer from that original horse, and god damn it, I will pummel that last little horse nugget into oblivion. And by that, I mean, back when it was the new thing, I saw endless cringe compilations and videos simply making fun of the performance for being bad, but I felt like I never really saw a more technical breakdown of it as a performance rather than just comedic takedowns of it as a spectacle, so I thought I'd take a whack at it myself. Likewise, I think that spectacle carried with it some other implications that we'll get into later, and I really don't think I ever saw anyone point those out at the time, so, you know, what better time to do so than, you know, 6 years later, which is to say, I don't think we were mean enough the first time. So, a lot of people probably don't know this about me, but, I did theater in high school. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. I'm something of an actor. So I've never fully pursued it as a career or anything, but I used to do theater in high school, and I always had an interest in acting and filmmaking as a kid, so while I don't really do much in that area as it stands, I still think a lot about acting and filmmaking. I love it. I live for this shit. I love it. Bring it the fuck on. So I'm always paying attention to it and thinking about it, and also autism. Yeah.
Let's wind the clocks back.
6 years. So, in 2016, David Ayer dropped the much-hyped superhero crossover whatever movie Suicide Squad, debuting the very method, very serious method actor Jared Leto's method interpretation of the Joker, which I don't know if you've heard, but he apparently method acted for. Famously, in the promotional material for the movie, stories went around about how he stayed in character for the entire duration of filming, how he nearly lost his mind for the role, how he was so crazy that he worried he'd be locked away for his performance.
Sure, Jan.
With an Oscar and a handful of well-received performances in different cult films under his belt, this really was his time to shine as an actor. Assuming you weren't on the internet where literally everyone was relentlessly roasting the really bad costume design. So, release date rolls around and Suicide Squad drops, and shocker, but it was bad. It was a bad movie. It was a bad stink movie that sucked, and it was bad. There's a lot of videos that have gone around in the time since that kind of break down why exactly it's such a shit show, including Best in the Game Dan Olsen's video about its editing, so I'm not going to get too much into that. Go watch his video, it's very good. But Jared Leto instantly became the laughingstock of the acting world, having had most of his scenes cut from the movie.
Were there any that didn't get cut from the movie?
Got cut from the movie.
No, I'm asking you, were there any that didn't get cut?
And what few scenes were left in the actual movie got mocked and roasted endlessly for being cringe. Who could have seen that coming? Wow, I don't know. So why is this? Why would you do this? So it should probably go without saying that with his whole I'm going so method that I'm gonna lose my mind, this role is keeping me awake at night, etc. nonsense, you know, I lost myself to the Joker. This is all pulling directly from the mythos that has since formed around Heath Ledger's, frankly, legendary portrayal of the character in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, which earned him the second posthumous acting Oscar in history and is just generally agreed to be one of the greatest performances of all time. In case you didn't know, again, I'll give a refresher, but in 2007, Christopher Nolan was working on the follow-up to his dark and gritty Batman series with 2005's Batman Begins, and the cast was posted announcing Hollywood pretty boy Heath Ledger to be playing the Joker, a move which drew a lot of skepticism at the time. No, that's the gay cowboy, man. You can't have you can't play the dang Joker. He's too pretty. No. And then the first trailer dropped, and everybody was, how you would say, gaggeth, shooketh, snatched the house down boots, to use a few turns of phrase. However, tragedy struck, and on January 22nd, 2008, Heath Ledger was found dead in his apartment of multiple drug intoxication, leading to much speculation on the role, his mental state, and whether or not his method acting and the role as the Joker played a part in his death. This had a mysterious air to it that lent a certain mystique to the performance, like, was this performance so dark and intense and twisted that the performance alone took the actual life of its actor?
No.
Short answer, no, of course not. But more on that later. So ever since then, the mythos surrounding Heath Ledger's performance lended to this overarching trope of serious strongman actors who go method and destroy their own lives as dedication to their craft, i.e. like, you know, with James Dean or a Marlon Brando, Daniel Day-Lewis, Leo DiCaprio, etc. In fact, Jared Leto himself was on this hype cycle long before Suicide Squad, but again, more on that later. Hence why I want to focus in on these two performances in particular, as Heath's performance was what was most prominent in the cultural consciousness at the time, and hopefully this gives an idea as to why the marketing and promotion leaned so heavily into how method Jared was going for the Joker specifically. Naturally, it seems obvious to compare the two performances, how Heath Ledger was so iconic and Django Lentil was bad, how it earned him a reputation as one of the most insufferable and unprofessional actors in Hollywood, how it alienated him from his co-stars, more or less single-handedly started the e-boy Joker TikTok trend, and how face tats on the Joker are clingy.
Yeah, he did some bad things, Jared Leto did. He gave
some really horrific gifts.
But I want to talk about the specifics, like what specifically makes E-Boy TikTok face tag lenient Joker fall short, and what specifically makes Heath's Joker stand out so much, and why it's so much more than just Leto bad, Ledger good. And more specifically, I want to talk about how method acting factored into both of their performances, or didn't, and why parroting this "I played a Batman villain that was so scary I lost my mind and shitted and farted in my diaper for 3 months afterwards" narrative isn't just like goofy and self-aggrandizing, but kind of outright disrespectful. There's a very good video about method acting by Best in the Game, Broy-Chanel, so I'll try my best not to just like reiterate the observations and criticisms made in that video about method acting. In fact, I actually disagree with some of the points made in that video. I think method as crafted by its original auteur, for I don't know what word I would use there, is not the best way to go about acting. Again, more exactly on why in Broy-Chanel's video, Best in the Game, but I do think it has merit when applied selectively by an actor who's like actually a professional and doesn't just use it as an excuse to abuse and berate everyone around them for the sake of their own ego. So basically, the school of method acting is this: it's you to sink yourself into a role as deeply and personally as possible, to bring out something real, something authentic, and basically make an emotional snuff film of yourself for the sake of art. You get on set, you have everybody on set refer to you as your character, you never break character even when the cameras are off, demand you live in a 1600s mud shack and shit in a chamber pot for the duration of the shoot. Like the whole time, the whole 4 months of filming is just one long bowel movement. You're playing a character who dies of dysentery. And yes, that's more or less how it originated and how most actors tend to use it. Anytime you hear in the news about somebody went method, that usually means something along those lines.
You only ever see people doing the method when they're playing an asshole.
But there are many examples of actors saying they use method acting or something similar without also committing to these absurd antics and generally irritating everyone around them, like Ellen Burstyn or Heath Ledger. So the problem with method acting is that acting is ultimately a performance, and as any autistic person knows, just because you feel something strongly does not mean you are emoting something equally as strongly. Nor does it mean that said emotion is what any particular scene needs in that exact moment. This is where I kind of disagree with Broy-Chanel's video, Best in the Game, because method acting can actually be useful for making more well-informed and effective choices to portray exactly what you think a scene needs, so long as you actually use it to make informed choices. In fact, in Best in the Game, Broy-Chanel's video, she specifically cited Meryl Streep as an example of a legendary actor who explicitly does not use method acting, but the process Meryl describes is much closer to what Heath Ledger was doing for The Dark Knight. Again, not that I'm refuting Broy's video, Best in the Game. So famously, in preparation for his role as the Joker, Heath Ledger locked himself in a hotel room for about a month, keeping a diary and experimenting with different voices, different postures, reading tons of Batman comics. Now, right off the bat here, I want to highlight a difference in how Heath Ledger uses method acting and how Jared Leto uses method acting. Can you see what it is? All of these things led to some kind of informed choice in the film itself. For his posture, he studied ventriloquist dummies, he created his voice in Laugh, he drew inspiration from Malcolm McDowell in A Clockwork Orange, and even helped design the makeup, which was inspired by Francis Bacon paintings. You can see how all of these things lend themselves to a choice he made in the film itself. His posture shows, making him stand out from the rest of the cast and being visually interesting by itself. His voice sounds a lot like Tom Waits.
No, I worry about a lot of things, but I don't worry about
And I thought my jokes were bad.
He does the laugh real funny and good. This is one of the honest-to-God benefits of method acting, in my opinion, which was providing more background to make informed choices. So, what kind of things did Jared Leto do? He male-used condoms to his co-stars, child laundered a pet rat on a co-star Margot Robbie, dragged a dead pig onto set and made a lower-billed cast member haul it around for him, blasted rope into a Playboy and left it at co-star Adewale Akinoye Abaje's house, insisted everyone on set exclusively refer to him in character as Mr. J, constantly harassed other cast and crew, pranking everyone and acting as unpredictably as possible, created a dynamic of intimidation and control with everyone around him. So let's think of what kind of informed choices this makes for his character and how it's portrayed in the movie. Being charitable here, you could maybe say that it makes the dynamic of fear between the Joker and the other characters a bit more authentic, but like, that's their performance, like not yours. Like, you're not the director. Like, just let them do their job. But even that isn't a specific informed choice. There's no guarantee that that's even going to translate into the movie unless the other actors are doing their job well. Like, that doesn't make your own performance better. And more importantly, it doesn't serve the objective of the role anyway, but we'll get back to that later. Back to Heath Ledger, the other biggest benefit of method acting, at least in my opinion, is for consistency, getting things like posture, getting voices and accents down consistently, dialects, physical tics, quirks, things like that. There's some conflicting reports here regarding whether or not Heath Ledger stayed quote unquote in character as the Joker the whole time on set. While on one hand, some cast members talked about how he stayed in character, like this Aaron Eckhart interview where he talks about the hospital scene and how Heath used it to help both of them develop the scene itself.
My one experience with Heath on the film was our scene together in the hospital bed, which was really my only scene with him. And I thought, well, I don't really have any lines. What am I going to do? And I had no idea what was going to happen. And so I got in the bed and they were lighting and Chris was walking around and doing things, and then Heath came around and Heath was always in character. So we just went through this organic process of developing this scene, which was really nothing. And then when we came time to shoot, we had this thing beautifully choreographed, and we never said a word to each other.
Note again here how each of the things Aaron talks about leads to an informed choice in the scene as it appears in the movie. However, Heath's family, friends, and other crew members have long worked to debunk this image of Heath staying in full Joker mode the entire time. They insist he was always professional, that it wasn't a dark or torturous or alienating experience, but that he adored playing the role and was having the time of his life. This is backed up by this Michael J. White interview where he talks about working with Heath.
Not only that, the whole set was playing.
Yeah, that's cool.
It was not one tense, serious moment or anything.
Which is crazy when you think of that performance from Ledger.
Like, Ledger was having a ball.
Awesome.
Oh, I mean,
do you know right away that this is going to be special?
Yeah, man. Yeah. He was, and that's another thing. He was so incredibly chill. The first day that he comes in, we shoot half of the day. He's in full makeup. We break for lunch. I asked the director, so what are we shooting after lunch? And he says, well, we're going to finish up this side of the room. I said, so do you mean to tell me that Heath has been in hours of makeup and he's not going to be on camera anytime today? He said, yeah. I was like, wow. He just did that for us.
That's awesome.
And coming from the guy who played Spawn, hell no.
You talk about him having so much fun with it, but also being so deep into it. And obviously there's been a lot of talk about, after he did pass away, how much effect this character had on him. What do you think about that?
That drives me up a wall. Because people want to write the story that this dark character consumed him. Drives me up a wall. Yeah. That's people's imagination. That's the story they wanted. No.
You didn't see that. You just saw a dude having fun.
No, this dude had fun. And cut. So anyway, it was just like that. And you can see his playful character.
In fact, I want to highlight something here. What Heath did do was appear on set in costume for shots where he wouldn't even be on camera. So he got into costume and got into character simply because he had so much fun doing it, and he wanted to make his coworkers' jobs a little bit easier. And maybe he had a little bit of drag queen in him, I don't know. And sure, I know I literally just criticized Jared Leto for that, but helping your co-stars get a more natural performance by getting into costume and character even when you don't need to isn't the same as forcing them to haul a dead pig around. Right? Like, we can see that, right? Now, this is largely just me interpreting what I can from what Heath Ledger's family, cast, and crew said about him. And I wasn't there myself, so I can't know for sure, but from what you can see, he maintains things like posture, voice, look, etc. of the Joker behind the scenes, but is still largely being himself, or at least professional. I would honestly wager that when people say he was in character, they were mostly just talking about those things like posture and voice and tics, not him losing himself to the madness of the role or anything like that, which honestly is kind of a funny thought to me, because if there's any madness to Heath Ledger's Joker, it's that he just doesn't give a remote fuck about anything, which would just be like Heath kind of just chilling and not giving a fuck about anything at all when he's in character, which it's clear when he says unfeeling, psychopathic, he clearly doesn't mean brooding and tortured, but actually unfeeling. Heath's Joker probably sleeps like a fucking baby after yeeting Maggie Gyllenhaal off a building and blowing up a hospital, which seems to me like a far cry from Jungle Bretto, or while we're at it, Jan Karangas as Andy Kaufman in Man on the Moon, tormenting everyone nonstop on set and just being a general nuisance for the entirety of the filming period, both on and off camera. And quick side note about Jim and Andy. Jim Carrey claimed to be so into the role that he was possessed by the actual Andy Kaufman. like the actual real Andy Kaufman, yet somehow missed that Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler were actually really good friends in real life, and that their feud was entirely just a bit. Like, the real Andy Kaufman never would have harassed that man off set. Like, that was entirely kayfabe, and Jim just, like, didn't know that, I guess? Anyway, if method acting is useful for making informed choices, what exactly are those choices you're making informed to do? So, when I was in theater in high school, my drama teacher told us about a play she saw about a woman who'd lost her son, and the actress playing the woman committed every single moment to portraying that gut-wrenching grief as authentically and heart-rendingly as possible. She then said that it was one of the worst plays and worst performances she'd ever seen. I don't remember the details of the plot she described, but if I remember correctly, it was just one of those, like, I need to find what happened to my son so I can get what little justice I can, you know. But the actress and presumably director had focused entirely on making her grief and emotions feel as real as possible and gave absolutely nothing to making sure that the performance had a clear purpose or objective. Like, cool sis, your kid's dead and all, and like F and chat, like that sucks and I get it, but like, and like what do you want me to do with that? Like, like, sure, you feel bad for her, but does that make the play worth watching? There's an interview with Daniel Radcliffe, whom I actually really like as an actor, and not just because he was the reason why I found out I liked boys when I was 11 in the Goblet of Fire drop, that I think about a lot, where he talks about acting outside of Harry Potter for like one of the first times, and he says that there are simple things that no one talked to me about. No one had asked me, what do you want to do with this scene? And that in Harry Potter, it was left up to our instincts. And I think that's really important here. Acting that emphasizes what an actor is feeling rather than what they're doing tends to fall short, because it's one thing to capture a moment of emotion, but emoting and acting are all tools. They're meant to serve a purpose. And based on the anecdote my high school acting teacher told me, it seems like had someone asked that actress the question, what do you want to do with this scene? She would have answered, be really sad, I guess? I don't know. And likewise, I have to ask, what exactly was Jared Leto doing with his scenes? Because if all of his antics led to him making informed decisions for his character, what were those decisions adding to the movie? This kind of gets into territory that I have to admit isn't entirely Django's fault here, because a directionless script and shitty directing can give even the best actors an uphill battle, see Attack of the Clones. But he's not off the hook either. So the production of Suicide Squad 2016 was a shit-hot mess from the beginning. It wasn't even a fully completed script at the start of the shoot, and it was kind of written as it was shot, and there were tons of changes all over the place. It was cut together from multiple different studios and multiple different times. Direction was all over the place, and it turns out that taking the David Lynch and Inland Empire approach doesn't exactly make for the most comprehensive, coherent comic book caper. So perhaps Jared's grandstanding and all of his work to create the dynamic of fear among his co-workers and all of this grandiosity he lent to the character might have served a stronger purpose in earlier drafts of the films, but ultimately that doesn't change the performance that we got. If Jared Leto wanted his Joker to be the craziest, wackiest, most unhinged, most dangerous and intimidating Joker ever put to film, and even if he perfectly succeeded in portraying all of those things and got exactly what he wanted out of each of his scenes, what I have to ask is that version of the Joker what this movie even needs the Joker to be? The Joker in this movie is largely a side character, with only a couple minutes of screen time, basically serving to add to Harvey's backstory and, pretty much nothing else. Like, he could have more or less been cut entirely from the movie and not impacted the plot much, like, at all. Besides maybe the scene where Harley bails on the squad to go party with him for a bit, or like whatever. I don't know what that was about. So trying to be this super intimidating, like scary final boss sort of character kind of doesn't really work for it anyway. It gives this kind of weight to each of his lines that isn't really warranted and only serves to jank up the flow and pace of the movie. The tone just clashes. Also, he didn't accomplish any of those things because his performance sucked and was bad. Instead, it comes across like the Joker is just desperate to be the main antagonist of a movie that he just really has very little to do with. At least a better actor could have delivered something that knows its place within the movie itself. Contrast this with Heath's Joker. Sure, he's unhinged and scary, but he doesn't have to convince you of that. He shows you with his actions. What he does do with his body is show you just how little concern or regard he has for anyone around him. He's having fun with them, sure, but frankly, he doesn't give a fuck most of the time whether the people around him are afraid of him or not. He gains control of the room by doing the unexpected, by disregarding the hierarchy in his actions. He doesn't waste time jumping around trying to convince anyone that he's in control. He just does it. And sure, he can pull the scary dominant "you come now daddy" intimidation when he needs to, but again, he's very careful about when exactly it's needed. Heath's Joker does it because the situation requires it. Leto's Joker does it because that seems to be the only thing on his mind at all times. And in a roundabout way, yeah, I guess that's kind of its own sort of creepy, because people acting like that is a huge red flag, but it's more like annoying TikTok predator creepy and not holy fuck, this man will do whatever the fuck he wants and nothing I can do will stop him creepy. And only one of those makes for a good Joker. Sure, it's not like Suicide Squad's Joker would have been good even if Heath was there instead of Leto, because the movie was bad, and the script and costuming are all bad, but for one thing, Heath actually made a lot of his costuming choices himself, or at least had a hand in their creation. Besides just the Francis Bacon influence I mentioned before, it was his idea to make sure that his Joker's hands were smeared with makeup, in order to highlight that his character did the makeup himself. It adds something to the scene. 2, given how Lebo acted on set, and given what we know about the messy production of the movie, you can't tell me that Leto had no say in those costuming choices. If he could make another actor drag a dead pig around, he could have Ed Norton the damage tattoo right the fuck off of J-Boy's forehead. He can keep the grill though, as a treat. Contrast this with Heath's Joker. Every choice Heath makes when he's on screen serves the goal of making sure his Joker is effectively upsetting the established order, and that his character does not care, does not feel, and is unconcerned with anything in this mortal coil except creating as much chaos as he possibly can. Every choice Leto makes serves the goal of being so crazy, dude. Heath moves a bit like a marionette, but he moves with purpose. He's erratic, but it comes across more as this character being disconnected from the world around him. Jangy floats around like a bad magician, or like a high school senior barred the fuck out on Zans trying to intimidate a freshman by acting crazy. Look at Heath's eyes. There's an intensity, yes, but it's more direct, natural. He makes a lot of eye contact. Sure, they'll fly around erratically from time to time to show how erratic the Joker's mind state is, but he looks and talks to you like a normal person, or at least like someone mimicking talking like a normal person. He creates unease by marrying chaos with casual nonchalance. He gets under your skin like an actual psychopath would. Contrast Linguini constantly widening his eyes, trying to look as crazy as possible. His character wants to convince you of how unhinged he is. Heath's doesn't have to. There's a video I found from an acting coach on YouTube that talks a little bit about this, and it was nice to see an acting coach make the same observations I made, and helps reassure me that I am, in fact, extremely fucking intelligent.
He just didn't make any clear decisions. Am I going to be crazy in a menacing way? Am I going to be crazy in a playful way? I feel that Leto got so caught up with being the Joker, he forgot the simple techniques of what is my objective? What do I need?
And that's the thing about losing yourself completely to method acting. When you're living and breathing a character, how much of you is left to make sure the performance is even working at all? There's this ideal that a lot of actors aspire to disappear into a role. Jerry Rangus has made a career of this. Jared Leto disappears into his role as a transgender woman. Jared Leto is unrecognizable in House of Gucci. There is no trace of Jared Leto in his portrayal of Mark David Chapman.
Also, I love how every time Jared Leto's in a movie, motherfuckers just forget that prosthetics exist for a minute.
So here's the thing. The whole concept of disappearing into a role is kind of a paradox when you start getting into how a lot of successful character actors actually do it. In that same 2013 New York Times Daniel Radcliffe interview, he talks about how after the Deathly Hallows wrapped up, he went through a phase of trying to distance himself from Harry Potter. I was struggling in vain not to come close to making a face that people would, oh my god, I'm not doing I had kind of a Daniel Radcliffe impression worked out in my head before I did this, and I've tried it a couple times, but I'm not. It's not there today. So I'm just gonna read it. I was struggling in vain not to come close to making a face that would make people think of Harry, and when asked if there were distinct traits of a quote Harry face, he answered, there isn't. It's just my face. I have to accept the fact that my face is gonna remind people of Harry Potter because I played that character. If I try to avoid being expressive in that same way, all I'll do is stop being expressive, and I won't be any farther away from that character. And the ironic thing is, when I watch Daniel Radcliffe in Swiss Army Man or Kill Your Darlings, not once do I think, oh, there's Harry. I mean, like maybe a little bit in Kill Your Darlings, but definitely not Swiss Army Man. There's a documentary about Philip Seymour Hoffman where it talks about how he used every bit of himself to highlight what he needed to make his character stand out. He could, quote, disappear into a role, yet it would still be distinctly him. Heath Ledger's relatives corroborate similar sentiments about him in a documentary about his own life. Hell, even as the Joker, you can see how Heath's own personality shines through in the Joker's humor and that little tongue flick thing he does. And that's the thing about acting. Everything that makes you, you, is a tool. Everything about your personality can be brought to the table to bring out what you need to bring out in a role, and those things paradoxically become transformative in and of themselves when used effectively. When your approach to acting is so often about disappearing into a role as much as you possibly can, not only are you, one, not gonna succeed, like, sorry pal, it's an uphill battle, again, quaff best in the game, Daniel Radcliffe, you are limiting yourself to the possibility of what your role can be to not you. Like, let's say you succeed. You fully transform yourself, everything about the way you talk, move, your voice, everything is unrecognizable from you, then what have you accomplished? Like, sure, Jared Leto in Dallas Buyers Club sure is not Jared Leto, but what else is the character? Like, what have you actively created, and what would its value be without relation to yourself? Like, sure, you might be unrecognizable, but does that make the performance entertaining? Is the character fun to watch, or is it just not you? Now, that might also be unfair to Mr. Jared Robinette Leto, because maybe... Now, that might also be unfair to Mr. Jared Robinette Leto, because maybe he did pull from himself to craft these characters, and it's not his fault that all he has to pull from is an allegedly creepy, more on that later, narcissistic dickwad with no personality at all, but I think it says a lot about his approach and his quality as an actor. So... I had a couple different variations of this part planned out, and to be honest, I was kind of undecided. Because the thing is, up until around Suicide Squad, I actually kind of liked Jared Leto as an actor. And some of that still holds up. Like, if I go back and watch some of his older movies, he can be really, really good. I unironically love his performance in Requiem for a Dream. And in Fight Club, well I guess I don't really remember him in Fight Club all that much. Or American Psycho. Or Thin Red Line. I don't know. I just remember going, oh, hey, that guy. And then he gets his face smashed in. And I had worked out a whole assessment of him as an actor, but I thought to myself, is that really fair for me to do when there's so many of his most famous roles that I haven't even seen? So I figured it'd be fair to watch more of his movies before I pass on a massive judgment of his accumulative career. But, well, a couple things happened. One, I don't want to do that, actually. 2, House of Gucci drops and he gets a Razzie for it. 3, Morbius drops and everyone also rips that movie to shreds. So originally the conclusion I reached was that Jared Leto was a skilled actor, but he is not a good actor. And what I mean by that is Jared Leto has the skill set to deliver amazing performances when put to best use. He's capable of modifying his body, showing deep, realistic, believable emotions, crying like a motherfucker on camera. And when working with a director that knows how to wrangle him in, it works. But he's not a good actor because a skill set is only what you can make with it. And when left to his own devices, he just consistently makes god-awful choices, if he even makes any choices at all. I think I am going to remove this hat because the reflective light is making me very orange. Nice, that's gonna be there for the rest of the video. Whereas somebody like Heath Ledger, he worked much more collaboratively with Christopher Nolan, and a lot of the decisions he made were of his own accord. Chris Nolan even made him a second unit director for the ransom scene, something Christopher Nolan famously never does, because his trust in Heath Ledger to put his skills to good use was that high. That is what a good actor does with a wide skill set. When left to his own devices, Jared Leto gives us, well, but put him in the hands of a director like Darren Aronofsky, somebody who's very good at squeezing very emotional performances from his actors, and you get absolute bangers like Requiem for a Dream. So maybe he has the skill set, but can only put it to good use if a good enough director is there to wrangle him in or something. But maybe even that's not fair, because I've seen him talk about his creative processes in his older movies, and he does seem to be aware of most of these things. And again, there are a ton of his movies that I haven't seen him in, so it might not be fair to boldly make that claim. And he was like, I don't know, he was fine in Blade Runner, I guess. I mean, it was kind of one note, actually. He really just kind of seemed to be playing himself. But he only had like 2 scenes, so it's like whatever. I mean, it doesn't like ruin the movie or anything. But even with what I've seen, there's a distinct pattern I've noticed even amongst people who used to be his fans, in that sometime after he won his Oscar for Dallas Buyers Club, something shifted. Every role he does now seems to be another tabloid method acting gimmick that consistently underwhelms. So while my assessment may or may not be entirely true for his career as a whole, it sure as shit is true for the last 9 years. I'm gonna be honest though, frankly, I don't really give a shit about whether or not I'm fair to Jared Leto, because Jared Leto has been accused by multiple people, including former collaborators, of creepy, predatory behavior, multiple people alleging that he dated them while underage, and detailing some pretty upsetting instances of sexual assault with him. All of these things are alleged. I've seen a lot of people say that these rumors have been debunked, but people like to just say that though. Like, you can just say anything you want at any time. Also, he has a cult, because of course he does. Not a single drop of melanin in sight. So yeah, like, I want to be fair to him as an artist, but I'm also not too eager to be leading the charge for a redemptive reassessment of an alleged sex pest, especially one who seems to still have an immense platform with insane outreach and influence. So I guess I don't really give a fuck about whether or not he's actually good or not. Oh, and by the way, he now denies having done any of the kooky, wacky shit that he bragged about doing to stay in character for Suicide Squad, claiming it was all tabloid bullshit, even though he was like the main voice in charge of spreading those rumors to begin with. And there are accounts that he was up to the exact same kind of inane bullshit on the sets of House of Gucci and Morbius. So looks like we're gonna get more of that. So yeah, I don't think Jared Leto is a good actor, and maybe he was once, but definitely not anymore, and he sucks, allegedly. So, fuck that guy. Hi. After The Dark Knight was released, so much buzz was generated from romanticizing Heath's health issues and death, and phrases like "went too far" for method acting floated around a lot. So when it came time for Leto to attempt the character, it hardly struck me as coincidental that suddenly he was doing the most method and talking so much about how painful his transformation was and how deep he was going and how it was driving him insane. He said he had so much respect for Heath and he wasn't even going to try to fill in his shoes, and then immediately spent the next year romanticizing himself the exact same way everyone romanticized Heath's death. The idea of torturing yourself for the method hardly started or ended with Heath Ledger, and this wasn't even the first time Jared Leto had indulged in it either, but I just feel like after Heath Ledger died, somebody in Jared Leto's shoes should have stopped to think about whether or not this was in good taste when picking up Heath's character. Especially after Heath Ledger's family and everyone involved in making The Dark Knights put so much time and energy into speaking out against the romanticization of Heath's death. And then fucking along comes Leto saying, well, I mean, yeah, Heath was incredible and I'm not going to try to replicate what he did or anything, but I am gonna go way more method and more tortured and even more twisted. The performance being ass was just kind of the disrespectful cherry on top, honestly. And maybe it wasn't him, but rather like tabloids and promotional teams working to push that narrative, since he's always done the whole method thing, but he seemed all too eager to just let it happen and soak up the attention until the movie dropped and everyone started making fun of him. And maybe I'm just biased because Heath's performance in The Dark Knight made such a huge impact on me as a kid that it literally changed my understanding of what was even possible to do with acting. But I don't think I've ever gotten to express just how sour of a taste it put in my mouth to see Jared Leto pull all that shit. Heath Ledger did not die because playing the Joker made him crazy. He died because he was overworked, over-medicated, and he mixed the wrong pills. And just like Heath Ledger didn't die because the Joker made him crazy, his Joker wasn't good because he went crazy. Also, he didn't go crazy. It was good because he made consistently clever, well thought out, and unorthodox choices, made a lot of them, and was able to execute those choices naturally and convincingly. He only went method enough to make the natural part easier, and from there he could focus instead on choices and playing off of the rest of the cast. And likewise, Jared Leto's roles are not going to get any better by him simply pushing himself to go more and more method. This romanticized approach to method acting misses not just what made Heath Ledger's Joker good, but what makes any performance good. I can't help but feel like Jared Leto isn't playing these characters for any movie, but rather just for Jared Leto. His life is the screenplay, and the plot of that screenplay is Jared Leto is a great actor. And while Jared Leto would probably be horrified at the suggestion that he was exploiting Heath in that way, and I doubt he even had Heath in mind after Suicide Squad, him still kind of going for this ultra method approach for each movie he makes still evokes the imagery for me, which is, I don't know, maybe that's on me, but do you kind of see what I'm Like I brought up Philip Seymour Hoffman earlier, and we didn't even get into that whole thing. Or for that matter, like a, you know, River Phoenix or Michael K. Williams or like any of those other actors. So it's not just Heath Ledger. Like I don't want to imply that just Heath Ledger was the only actor who died and then got romanticized for, you know, sinking themselves so much into their craft. It's like a recurring problem in the industry and within culture, and it extends beyond acting too. Like you could say the same things about, you know, any musician who's struggled with mental illness or addiction and then died and then had a lot of their art attributed to that addiction or death or mental illness. But again, that's a much broader topic, and we're talking about the fucking Joker, baby. I remember the moment I was watching The Dark Knight at the midnight premiere when the Joker says his final monologue.
I think you and I are destined to do this forever.
My heart just dropped as I felt like that line just slapped me in the face with how cool of a future we were robbed of when he died. And like, why do I feel the need to keep talking about this? Like, why did I feel the need to do a bait and switch with this Jared Leto topic just to gush about a like good but generally pretty overrated superhero movie from 2008? Like, I keep rewriting this section and returning back to it over and over again. Like it's been 3 months since I wrote and recorded the rest of this video because I feel like the conclusion that Jared Leto's approach is just bad doesn't quite do it for me. It doesn't sit right. And nor do I feel like I've expressed what I think makes Heath Ledger's performance worth revisiting 14 years later. And I think what I realized I want people to get out of this video is this. While yes, romanticizing his death disrespects his legacy and downplays how good of an actor he really was, and that romanticizing going so method that you lose your mind is romanticizing his death even if it doesn't intend to, I don't want to just stop at wasn't Heath Ledger good? Super sucks that he's dead. Is that Heath Ledger was also only getting started. One of the reasons that performance has stuck with me for so long is that even now when I'm watching it, my brain is tantalized by what else he might have had in store. It's not better because he died, it's more painful. And the sting is in how much more work he had in him. But you know what? I don't think that work has to die with him. And I think an even better way to honor what he did is to learn from and build off of it. Like, sure, nobody will do it the exact way he did it because it is his personality on display and he played his characters in a way that was uniquely him, but somebody can expand on the approach he took and the ideas he was exploring. And maybe it's not that Jared Leto was or wasn't disrespecting him or that Jared Leto was stealing from him. It's that maybe he should have. Like, I think much more than seeing people say nobody could ever top Heath's Joker or seeing people try to out-method him, he would have liked to see somebody learning from him and to see the work he started on picked up by more and more people. And maybe it is. I wouldn't know. I didn't go to acting school because I'm not a fucking nerd. And I know it's been memed to death at this point, and it's so nebulous that I think people forget just how utterly left field and bewildering that performance actually was when it came out. Nobody had approached the Joker in that way before. That kind of marionette movement, the level of menace, just how grimy and unnerving the makeup was and how black the comedy was. Like, as morbid as it was, Heath Ledger's Joker was also funny in a more authentic way than the Joker's usual campy approach. Like, okay, it's brutal and disturbing and all, but tell me the pencil trick isn't one of the funniest fucking things any iteration of the Joker has ever done. It's fucking good. It's really good. I love that scene. Like, it was such a radically unheard of approach to the character, and I think that might be a little bit lost on audiences who weren't there at the time, and while parts of the movie haven't aged quite as well, every second Heath spends on screen is so goddamn entertaining that 14 years later, my eyes are still glued to the frame every time he appears on screen. And that's something worth learning from. Heath Ledger's performance in The Dark Knight fundamentally changed the way I think about acting, and I think it should change the way others think about acting as well. And while originally this video was structured more as like a Jared Leto hit piece and I was gonna end on a snarky, it's not just the cringe, it's the disrespect, frankly. But I think I'd rather end it on the note of learning from what both Leto's and Ledger's careers have shown us. I hope I gave somebody some more context as to why somebody as dedicated and immersed as Jared Leto can churn out so many bad to middling performances. And I also hope I gave people a reason to revisit the work Heath Ledger did. But I don't think, man, Heath Ledger's Joker sure was really good is enough reason to revisit it. I think it has merit to be looked at not just as a spectacle, but as a performance worth analyzing and learning from. And as much as Jared Leto rubs me the wrong way, it would still be cool to see his skills go towards something more meaningful again. Like the way Jared Leto approaches his characters isn't entirely devoid of value. Leto can embody a character in a fairly realistic way. It's just that realism doesn't necessarily make for the best performance, though that's a topic for a whole other video. But his scope is fundamentally limited by this approach. And if he's gonna make the move to blockbusters and superhero movies, then his characters need more clear goals to work towards and directors who can squeeze out more dynamics from him. He'd have to develop a quicker way to get in and out of character, when to stop and think so that he can make choices based on the bigger picture, how to work with other actors and crew rather than just kind of inconveniencing them or making himself the center of attention. But honestly, I have my doubts that he's gonna do that because, like I said, said, I don't think getting the best performance is why he does it, really. Or maybe he does genuinely think it's what's best for the performance. Maybe he is thinking about the bigger picture and he just has like really, really terrible taste. I don't know. While we're at it, it'd be pretty cool if he'd stop fucking kids and starting cults. That's you know, probably a higher priority. In fact, I'm actually kind of okay if his career were to just kind of like stop for a minute so that whole thing could just be handled, dealt with, whatever. Actually, yeah, fuck that guy. God damn, I love being a fucking hater. Fuck you, Jared Leto. Anyways, back to the outro I filmed like 3 months ago. Oh my god, hi everybody, thank you for watching my first video essay. Oh my god, make sure to like and subscribe and follow. Oh my god, I do like gaming. Yeah, so that was my first video essay ever. This shit's hard. I'm getting a lot of respect for all the commentary YouTubers I follow and shit. But I'm hoping to maybe do more of this in the future. And I don't know, this credits section is gonna be pretty short because it was all me, bitch. That was all me. I did all of that, wow. I don't have a Patreon or anything, but feel free to follow me on Twitter and Twitch and stuff like that. There's probably more gaming videos coming soon, but editing is hard and takes a long time. But thank you for watching. I hope you all had fun. Be sure to tip your sex workers. I don't know. Why so serious? So yeah, that's it. That's the video. Bitch.